excited to present at this conference. I wanted to say that I have great respect for the Animas Coaching School and the work that Nick and his team are doing. And the conference theme was immediately compelling to me. And I can tell you more about why in a moment. But I wanted to say something about my plan for our time together. So actually, I'm just kind of overwhelmed by how many people are here. Let me take a moment. I want to look at you before I tell you my plan. Wow. Some familiar faces, some new faces. Okay. So my plan for our time together. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about this topic. And then my plan is to tell you a story as a way to introduce and illustrate a framework for expanding our emotional range. And then I want to invite you. Well, this whole this whole presentation really is an invitation into dialogue, but I'll invite you into an interactive activity following that, likely in breakout groups. But and then we'll have Q&A and we'll talk together. How does that sound to everybody? I see a lot of thumbs up, head nods. Okay. So so here goes. What Ruth said about me is true. I'm a psychoanalyst, a coach, a supervisor, and I'm an educator. I like to think of myself as theoretically polyamorous because I draw upon each of these disciplines and more in my work. So today's presentation is titled Meeting Clients Where We Are, Expanding the Coach's Emotional Range. Now, usually we're told to meet clients where they are, and the reason this conference theme appealed to me so much is because of all the things I do, success in my work really depends on how much work I've done on myself. So my clients meet me where I am, and today's talk is really about three things. It's about the impact of our emotional availability on the coaching relationship. It's about an orientation toward the tension and the discomfort that gets generated inside of us. And it's about the work required to become more open and more welcoming of the full range of human experience, including and especially our own limitations. Today, we're going to be talking about expanding our emotional range, our ability to tolerate a wider range of emotions, and its impact on how we use that information to skillfully respond to our clients in the moment. So a unique contribution of our work in our field is offering the opportunity for our clients to feel heard, to see themselves in new ways, to access their own creativity, to experience themselves in new ways so that they can make new choices about what they want to do and how they want to be with others. So I'm saying this to whatever your background, whatever your theoretical orientation in this work, and whatever really I think helping role you're in, whether you identify as a coach or a sister or a partner, whatever it is, whether it's CBT that you use, positive psychology, performance psychology, if you trained at the Jay Shetty School, if you were a psychotherapist and then you became a coach, if you have a PhD in coaching psychology from a distinguished university, whatever your walk of life, it's I believe it's the way we relate that has a profound impact on the quality and the outcomes of our work. I think that's been pretty consistently talked about over the course of this day. And so with that in mind, one area of our work that can always be expanded and deepened is the work we do on ourselves. It's a lifelong process to know yourself in order to use yourself. I love that about this work and about our work. Now, I think this was alluded to before, but sometimes the feelings that come up when we're coaching are difficult to tolerate. Helplessness. These are pretty common. Hopelessness, fear, shame, shame about mistakes, anxious feelings, anxious about getting it right, anxious about not stepping in it with a client, maybe about losing a client, envious feelings. The list goes on. Affectionate feelings, loving feelings, angry feelings, whatever they are. Most of us in the helping professions, we're drawn to this work either consciously or unconsciously because of roles we took up in our families of origin, where you were first introduced to the emotional life, to the rules of the road. So back then, there were things we all learned about what feelings were going to be acceptable and useful, and those we learned to avoid. Everyone with me so far? Okay. So our interpersonal tendencies around openness and or avoidance were learned early on in our lives, in our families. Now, frequently, the very feelings that contribute to our clients' challenges are feelings that we've learned to avoid or step around. At least from my vantage point, when I'm functioning as a supervisor in my supervisory role and work, at least these are the types of clients that people bring into supervision. And as a coach, these are the kind of clients that I take to my own supervisors. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah, okay. So I think part of excellence in our work, part of what it means to become excellent or strive towards excellence is not our work in changing people, but finding a way to meet them where they are so that they can let us know what's interfering with getting what they say they want. That could mean becoming a more effective leader, leading their team, meeting a particular sales target, falling in love, staying in love, getting a promotion, changing course in life, becoming a more skillful coach, building a coaching business, whatever it is, whatever the topic. We want our clients to be able to tell us what it is that's getting in the way of their having what they say they want. So when we can experience and tolerate a wider range of feelings, fantasies, states of tension, we're more able to be with our clients, to meet them where they are, and to understand what they're telling us in verbal and nonverbal ways. So I hold that each client we work with is utterly unique. This is the uniqueness principle. And therefore, each client affords us the opportunity to stretch and expand our emotional range, which in turn provides us with the ability to work with an ever wider array of types of clients. So doing this work can result in a virtuous cycle. For as challenging as our work can be, working through those challenges leaves us increasingly freer to think creatively, to make good choices about what to do next, and to enjoy ourselves along the way. So that's why I was interested in this topic. Part of how I've learned to work is to pay very close attention to my internal process, what's happening inside me. And so I study myself. I think this is, everyone's familiar with this. I observe the subtle dynamics, the tensions, the bodily sensations, feelings, fantasies, pulls on my attention inside of me, and I work to make meaning of that material. So in doing this work, I ask myself 7 questions. Those questions are, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? What would I love to do or say to this person right now? What effect would it have on our relationship if I did or said what I wanted? What is she, he, they feeling? What are they feeling? And why might they be feeling that way? And finally, what can I say that would progress our work together? I'm going to tell a story to show you how I use these questions in the moment. So I was supervising a coach. We'll call this coach Jane. Jane had acted on her impulse to refer her client to a career counselor. That was not something Jane did, only to receive notice from the sponsor that they would like this client to complete the final 2 sessions with Jane. The sponsor felt the client was comfortable enough with Jane that it would be too onerous for her to begin with someone else at this point. So Jane was feeling defeated and puzzled, somewhat exasperated. She was not sure what she wanted or needed in the supervision session, but it was clear that she was uncomfortable. So as we talked about this case, as she narrated her case, Jane reported feeling overwhelmed with boredom around her client, who she described in unflattering terms. I found myself feeling sorry for her client, actually. And I was having critical thoughts about Jane. It was a tough moment for me because my role is to be her supervisor and to support her, not to criticize her. And so that's question number 1. What am I feeling? In this case, uh, I was frightened that she'd taken impulsive action that was potentially hurtful, possibly unethical. And I felt powerless since it was done. It was a done deal. And I couldn't influence her. And feeling powerless, I know of myself that I must have also felt some version of anger, something like irritation. So question 2 asks, why am I feeling this way? Now, I know about myself that when I'm having critical thoughts about someone, critical thoughts, criticality is not a feeling. It's more of a state of mind, set of thoughts. So I know that when I'm having critical thoughts, some part of me is feeling either hurt or anxious or frightened, maybe competitive. There's some unpleasant sensation that has passed through my body and mind. It could have been a squeeze in my stomach, a pain in my chest, a feeling of anxiety. But I was feeling, in this moment, I was feeling a tinge of hurt. I felt I was being used as a confessional to make my client feel better, rather than she was using me in that way, rather than to work collaboratively with me. In some way, she was indirectly asking me to provide a kind of emotional rubber stamp after the fact. She had abandoned our partnership, and now she wanted me to help pick up the pieces. I felt discarded and dismissed. So this brings us to question 3. And my honest answer to question 3, it doesn't sound so good. What do I want to do or say to this person? Some part of me wanted to refer her out, to kick her out, to give her a taste of her own medicine. Now, I say this because our answers to question 3 are usually not the sort we're proud of or want to make public like I am right now. They don't make us feel good about ourselves, but knowing about and acknowledging to ourselves our most florid fantasies is crucial to making contact with and discharging some of the tension generated by these difficult feelings. That's part of the process of containment. When we do that, we're more able to contain the feelings rather than have them leak out by going into action and ending up saying something or doing something that we'll regret. So, and there are so many subtle ways that I think we're all familiar with, and some not so subtle actions we can take to deal with our feelings. Withdrawing into silence, inadvertently ending the session early, revealing what's inside of us prematurely before we know enough about it in a way that could be hurtful, unconsciously forgetting the next session, or worse. So I'll say one more thing here about question 3, because I think it can be the most challenging. Remember, in the unconscious mind, people want to either make love to you or kill you. I'm going to say that again. In the unconscious mind, people want to either make love to you or kill you. It's an uncivilized place. Everything about our training to be civilized people suggests we keep those thoughts from surfacing to awareness so we don't get caught saying them out loud. So we've all learned to inhibit ourselves when it comes to acknowledging these very human but uncivilized impulses. And so where question 3 invites fantasy, what do I want to say or do to this person? Question 4 rains on this uncivilized parade by introducing reality. What would be the effect if I did or said what I wanted? Now, in my case, it certainly wouldn't be very helpful to Jane if I did what I wanted. At a minimum, I might lose a supervisee. But I'm aware that Jane looks up to me. She's entrusted me with an intimate glimpse into ways she struggles. And I feel a deep moral obligation to stick with her. So at this point in the process, I turn my attention outward and I focus on Jane's experience. Question 5 asks, and question 6, what might she be feeling? And why might she be feeling this way? Now, these questions invite me to imagine and resonate emotionally with Jane, to stand in her shoes. So getting into this more generous state of mind is only really possible because I allowed myself to feel the primary emotions stimulated in me and discharge some of the inherent tension by having a fantasy, by acknowledging them. So the feelings themselves, they interfered with my ability to think. But by doing the internal work that I described, I allowed them to pass through me. Feelings are like the weather. Feelings and sensations, they come and go when you can feel them. But when we block them from being felt, when we're invested in not feeling, they tend to stick around. So I knew it would be important for Jane to feel accepted by me. She tends to be self-critical and sometimes unacceptable to herself. So this was a tricky moment because I was contending with critical thoughts and I had an unpleasant feelings. So I held in mind that the feelings she was struggling with in this case are just natural. They're a normal part of this work. In fact, I was struggling with some of the same feelings she was. And I assumed that anyone in this situation would have to tolerate these terrible feelings. In fact, I could now see that the feelings I had inside of me were quite similar to the feelings Jane had acted upon with her client. It was a repetition of sorts, an echo. Without knowing it, Jane successfully helped me to experience what she'd been contending with. It's part of what she was telling me non-verbally. It's worth acknowledging here again that all of this happened in a flash. I'm breaking it down now for teaching purposes, but in the moment, it was a collision of unpleasurable sensations, thoughts, and feelings inside of me that I worked to contain so I could perceive and consider their meaning. The final question, 7, asks, what can I say that would progress our work together? Now, I knew that the emotional communication embedded within my response would be important. In other words, the way that I spoke to Jane was going to communicate something. And I knew I wanted Jane to feel understood. I asked her the question in this way: what on earth is wanting to be understood about this case? I'm going to say that again in that way. What on earth is wanting to be understood about this case? On its surface, I merely wondered aloud, what on earth is wanting to be understood about this case? But this question could have been wounding to Jane if I had asked it with a tone or in a way that conveyed my criticality. That was a moment where that part of me could have leaked out. if some of my punish, if I wanted to give that feeling back to her. What on earth is wanting to be understood, Jane? When I talk to my 3-year-old like that, it doesn't go so well. So I was able to find a part of me that was befuddled and puzzled, as I imagined Jane was. And I think that feeling was unavailable to Jane in the moment, but I formulated my question to speak to the puzzled part and to mirror, to illustrate some of the exasperation that was in the room. So I used the phrase "on Earth" and an exclamatory tone to do this work. I spoke playfully to keep the tension low. Jane chuckled when she heard my question, and that signaled to me that something had resonated. She said that there wasn't actually there wasn't actually anything she wanted to understand about the case. And then she paused. That was poignant. And she acknowledged that she may have referred the client to another coach as a way to deal with the difficult feelings she was experiencing. So it was a human moment, a connected moment between us. And the first moment in the session when humor and a sense of play lightened the feeling of tension and urgency that had initially filled the room. So I assume that seeing an emotional part of herself in me helped her relax. And Jane became newly interested in understanding her experience with her client. So following that, Jane and I worked together to understand her client. She hypothesized that the client repetitively gets herself rejected, fired, kicked out, just as Jane wanted to get rid of her client to deal with her feelings of boredom. So as we started playing with the idea of getting rid of as possibly part of the client, and remember, these are hypotheses. We're not right. We're talking so that we might try to understand, but we don't know. This is not about truth. We're trying to come up with some explanation for some of these puzzling phenomena. That's part of how we work. So we started playing with getting rid of as part of possibly part of the client's history, their defensive structure, the way that they a repetition that they're that they're experienced with, part of how they distance themselves from dangerous feelings. So in this way, Jane became newly interested in understanding her client, and then she moved on to questions about what she wanted to do next, which I don't want to talk about here because that's not really the point. We're talking about the inner work involved in expanding our emotional range. I'm telling you this story for teaching purposes. These questions are so baked into me that they've become a part of my automatic process. So it's true. I'm illustrating a moment, but these questions live in my mind and in my system. And I think that comes from repeated practice. We can talk more about that, but there is something that seems unreal about this, the ability to do that work very fast. So the discipline here that I'm presenting is a focus on the self of the coach, right? This is really about looking at, knowing more about, and even more about what is inside of us. That is lifelong work. And we have this idea in coaching that our clients are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And I believe that. And I believe that about ourselves too. But something interferes with our natural creativity and resourcefulness. And so part of this orientation is around understanding what impedes our natural resourcefulness and creativity. And so these 7 questions really provide a roadmap for understanding something about our own relationship with what gets stimulated inside of us. So in some ways, I have a lot of trust in my clients and in myself that when I can do the work of knowing more about what's in me, liberating myself from the grips of something intolerable, then my creative mind usually does a really good job And my clients' creative minds usually do a really good job once we get back into a curious space, a creative space, a playful space, right? But it's these moments impinge upon our natural playfulness and our creativity. And so that's really what we're talking about here. So I think there's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen following our basic coach training. And one of the supposed tos in the coaching world that seems pretty ubiquitous and can be quite pernicious is our espoused values around what it means to be present with the client. And so it sounds to me like one thing you may be describing, I don't know if this is true, but this is what I flashed upon is a kind of a standard, a way of being that to me sounds, for me, quite exhausting. To somehow push the contents of my mind aside to focus like a laser beam on the person in front of me, um, that uh, that project looks to me, for me, looks like it takes a lot of energy because you're talking about a kind of selective avoidance or exclusion. So this is for me, right? So my approach would be more to let in what's coming in and to wonder about it, to let it be part of the process, making the assumption that what's coming in right now to my receptive organ, to my piano, the keys that are being played on my piano are in some way a response to what's happening in the room between us. And so it's a slightly different orientation. Well, I don't know if one's right, but yeah, I don't think one's right. If it's working for you, great. But that's that. So I don't know if I would reconcile it. I think you have to, if that works for you, awesome. It is possible to be blindsided, always. But if and when that happens, there's opportunity there. If something happens in a coaching session that stimulates a memory from your life, um, that memory is likely related to something happening in the room. We have an idea that uh, as a heuristic, an assumption, a working assumption, for the purposes of supervision and doing this work, that 90% of what you're experiencing when you're in the room with the client is coming from the outside. So it may be true that you have some work to do in your own therapy or your own coaching on your history. And it might be that having some unexamined part of yourself, that's part of our work in the helping professions. It's a liability as long as it's unexamined. But allowing this work that it came up in a session makes for a wonderful opportunity to do some of the work that is ready to be done, to know more about what's in you and to let that be part of your instrument, your uniqueness. Well, I can say this, that I think about our work as I take an understanding based approach. If my client can help me understand them, if my client can be successful at getting me to understand something, they're going to really understand it. So if part of the project is helping our clients really know themselves, really understand something about what interferes with them, they're having what they say they want. If they can help me know that, what it is, we've done our work, right? So if I can be taught, then you've done the learning. So I think you're seeing it, what looks like a technique or something, like responding to a question with a question, but really underneath that is a deep desire to understand more, to really get it about you, about me, about what our project is. So I'll say about myself is that I was a school teacher first and went into coaching, my own coaching business and working as a consultant independently before completing my training as a psychoanalyst. So that was really the order of operations for me. And I always used supervision when I was training as a coach. And so in a way, it's that's just how it unfolded in my life. But I tried to give today's talk without using any jargon from psychoanalysis. But really, of course, we're talking about transference and countertransference and induced feelings, joining and mirroring and resistance, the coach's resistance, the client's resistance. All of that is here. But I think when we work as coaches, I don't think it's helpful to use that language necessarily, because I think that language can be really off-putting. It's the stories, it's the meaning of that language. We make our own definitions of these terms when we work together in supervision and groups. So yeah, I guess I'll leave. I want to leave. Thank you for that, and thank everybody for helping me give this presentation. I want to. I'm always down for being in touch. You can find me on LinkedIn, um, uh, and I'd love to have a conversation. If at some point you want to do that, feel free to drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you.